Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime was, objectively speaking, the most pretentious room in the known galaxy. Vaulted ceilings stretched upward into a holographic representation of swirling nebulae. Crystalline pillars hummed with soft, allegedly calming frequencies. The air itself was regulated to accommodate 30 different respiratory systems, which meant it smelled like a zoo having an identity crisis. And right now, Commander Fiona of the Terran Defense Initiative was sitting in the defendant's chair, wondering if she could order coffee through her neural link without anyone noticing. Spoiler alert, she couldn't, and she'd already tried. Twice. Next to her sat Oren, her tactical officer, who looked like he was watching the galaxy's best comedy show. His eyes kept darting between the assembled council representatives, each more colorful and bizarre than the last, and his lips kept twitching like he was physically restraining laughter. Smart kid. Terrible poker face. The council itself was arranged in a semicircle on an elevated platform, because apparently sitting on the same level as the accused would have been too egalitarian. 5 species had founded this particular bureaucratic nightmare millennia ago, but today only 3 of their representatives had bothered to show up: the Urathi, the Nemari, and the Yolmec. Each one looked like they'd been personally offended by humanity's mere existence. The Urathi representative, Molreshi, was the first to speak. Picture an ant the size of a grown human, but with more legs and significantly more attitude. Its mandibles clicked in a rhythm that the translation matrix converted into clipped, officious tones. "Commander Fiona of Earth," Molreshi began, and, wow, even through the translator it sounded condescending. "You stand before the Galactic Council to answer for crimes most severe. Your species, in its recent conflict with the Urathi border fleets, has engaged in conduct so barbaric, so beyond the pale of civilized warfare, that we question whether humanity possesses the moral framework necessary for participation in galactic society." Fiona blinked. Once. Twice. Then she leaned back in her chair, which squeaked embarrassingly in the dead silence. "We won a defensive war," she said flatly. "You attacked our colony on Titan's Reach. We fought back. We won. I'm genuinely unclear what the problem is here." Oren made a sound that might have been a cough or might have been a suppressed snort. Hard to tell. The acoustics in here were weird. Molreshi's antennae quivered, which Fiona had learned meant it was agitated. Good. She was agitated, too. She'd been pulled out of her shore leave, stuffed into a formal uniform that was 2 sizes too tight, because apparently military logistics couldn't keep up with her stress eating, and dragged halfway across the sector for what was essentially a galactic parent-teacher conference. "The problem," Molreshi said, its voice rising half an octave, "is that you violated the Accordan principles. Every single one of them. Multiple times. Sometimes simultaneously." "The what now?" Oren interjected, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. The Nemari representative, Pleshun, rippled in what might have been disgust. The Nemari were aquatic, sort of. If you imagined jellyfish that had evolved philosophy degrees and a superiority complex. Pleshun's translucent form floated in a containment tank, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that the translation software rendered as disappointed schoolteacher energy. "The accordant principles," Pleshun's translator burbled, "are the foundation of civilized warfare. They have governed military conflict in this galaxy for over 4,000 standard rotations. Every spacefaring species with any claim to culture has agreed to them, studied them, implemented them." "Huh," Fiona said. "Must have missed that memo." This is not a joke. Mulreshy's mandibles clacked so hard they actually echoed. Your forces engaged in ambush tactics. Ambush! You attacked our fleets without warning, without formal challenge, without even the basic courtesy of identifying your attack vectors in advance. Oren's face was doing something complicated. He looked like a man trying to solve a math problem where the numbers had been replaced with increasingly absurd jokes. "You're upset," he said slowly, "that we didn't tell you where we were going to attack you before we attacked you?" "Yes!" Mulreshy actually rose slightly from its seated position. "That is precisely the violation. Article 9 of the Accordant Principles clearly states that all military engagements must be preceded by formal notification of intent, delivered no less than 6 planetary rotations in advance." Fiona opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're messing with us," she finally said. "This is a prank. Where are the cameras? Did Jenkins put you up to this? Because this would be exactly his sense of humor." "Commander Fiona," Pleshun rippled with what the translator interpreted as aggressive patience, "this is no jest. Your species engaged in subterfuge, deception, and psychological manipulation. You used camouflage to blend with your surroundings, making yourselves difficult to target. You broadcast confusing signals across our communication frequencies. You attacked during our vessel's rest cycles when crew alertness was at minimum efficiency." "You attacked at night?" Fiona asked, her voice climbing into a register she usually reserved for particularly stupid logistics reports. "The Urathi operate on a circadian rhythm," Mulreshy shot back. "It is understood across all civilized species that combat operations pause during rest cycles. This is fundamental. This is basic decency." Oren lost it. He actually laughed, a short bark of sound that he tried to turn into another cough, failed, and then just gave up and covered his face with his hand. Fiona shot him a look that said, "Pull it together," but honestly, she was right there with him. This was insane. This was beyond insane. This was insanity that had gone to graduate school and come back with a thesis on being more insane. "Let me get this straight," Fiona said, and her voice had gone into that dangerous calm zone that her crew knew meant someone was about to get verbally dismantled. "You attacked our colony, unprovoked, killed about 3,000 civilians in the initial bombardment. We mobilized our defense fleet, hunted down your invasion force, and eliminated it using superior tactics and operational security. And now you're prosecuting us because we didn't fight fair?" "Fair?" The third council representative finally spoke. Remoth of the Yolmec had been silent up until now, sitting like a mountain of sentient granite in the corner of the platform. The Yolmec were big, stone-skinned, and looked like someone had given a boulder both consciousness and opinions. Remoth's voice was like grinding tectonic plates. "This is not about fairness, human. This is about order. This is about preventing warfare from devolving into chaos." "Chaos," Fiona repeated. "Right. As opposed to the orderly process of bombing civilian colonies?" "We issued a formal challenge." Mulreshy's mandibles were practically vibrating. 3 lunar cycles in advance. We transmitted the official declaration of territorial dispute through proper diplomatic channels. We followed every protocol. "Oh, that message," Oren said, and now he wasn't even trying to hide his grin. "We thought that was spam. The translation algorithm flagged it as a probable scam because, and I'm quoting the report here, no legitimate military organization would announce their invasion date in advance like they're sending a birthday party invitation." The silence that followed could have had its own gravity well. Pleshun pulsed a color that the translator didn't even bother to interpret, which probably meant It was some kind of obscene gesture in Nimari culture. Mulreshi's antennae went completely flat against its head, and Remoth just stared, unblinking, like a statue contemplating whether rocks could experience second-hand embarrassment. "You thought," Mulreshi finally said, each word coming out like it was being individually extracted with pliers, "that our formal declaration of war was spam?" "In our defense," Fiona said, and she was definitely enjoying this more than she should have been. "We get a lot of weird messages. Last month, someone tried to sell us an extended warranty on our spacecraft. The month before that, we got a message claiming to be from a deposed prince of some nebula kingdom who needed help transferring funds. So, yeah, when we got a message that said, 'We will be invading your territory in 3 months. Please prepare your defenses accordingly,' we just kind of archived it." Oren was shaking. His shoulders were physically trembling with suppressed laughter. "This is outrageous," Pleishun burbled. "This is a fundamental failure of diplomatic recognition." "Okay, but consider this counterpoint," Fiona said, leaning forward now, "because if she was going to be here, she might as well commit to the bit. Why in the name of Newton's ghost would anyone actually do that? Why would any military force with functioning brain cells announce their invasion in advance? That's not strategy. That's suicide, with extra steps. It is the accordant principles." Mulreshi was definitely yelling now, though the translator tried to make it sound dignified. Failed, but tried. "It is how civilized species conduct warfare, with honor, with predictability, with mutual respect for the sanctity of military tradition." "Right, right," Fiona nodded like she understood, which she absolutely did not. "And how often do you folks go to war, exactly?" That question landed like a tactical nuke in a phone booth. The council representatives exchanged glances, or whatever their species did that was equivalent to exchanging glances. Mulreshi's antennae twitched. Pleishun's bioluminescence flickered. Rymoth remained perfectly still, which for a Yolmec probably counted as fidgeting. "The accordant principles," Pleishun finally said, "have successfully prevented total warfare for 4 millennia. Conflicts are contained, resolved through formal military engagement under agreed-upon parameters, and concluded with minimal loss of life." "Minimal loss of life," Fiona repeated. "So you do fight. You just fight, politely?" "We fight with honor," Mulreshi said. "We fight with rules. We fight in ways that preserve the dignity of all participants and prevent conflicts from escalating into extinction-level events." Oren raised his hand like he was in school. Fiona wanted to kick him under the table, but they were too far apart. "Question," he said cheerfully. "Do these rules actually work? Like, has anyone ever tried just not following them?" And there it was. The question that made the entire chamber feel like someone had suddenly turned off the life support. Remoth's eyes, which were basically just darker spots in stone, seemed to focus more intently on Oren. "Young human, the accordant principles work because all civilized species agree to uphold them. The moment one species breaks faith, the entire system collapses." "So no one's ever tried," Oren said. "Everyone tries them once," Rymoth said, and for the first time there was something almost like respect in that grinding voice. "Then they learn what happens when the entire galaxy enforces compliance." Fiona felt her tactical instincts perk up. That was a threat. Veiled, but definitely a threat. The Galactic Council was basically saying, "Follow our rules or face collective punishment," which, to be fair, was pretty standard for any hegemonic power structure. Humans had invented that particular management style about 6,000 years ago and had been refining it ever since. So, let me see if I understand the situation, Fiona said, and her voice had gone cold now, professional. Humanity is a newcomer to the galactic stage. We've been spacefaring for what, 60 years? We barely have 6 colony worlds. We're still figuring out faster-than-light travel half the time. And you're telling me that you folks have a set of rules established millennia before we even knew you existed, and you expect us to just automatically comply with them? The accordant principles are universal, Pleshun said. Universal, Fiona repeated. Meaning what, exactly? Universal as in everyone agrees? Or universal as in you folks decided they were universal and everyone else just has to deal with it? This is semantics, Mulreshi snapped. No, Fiona said, and she stood up now, which made Oren scramble to his feet beside her. This is the fundamental question. You summoned me here to answer for crimes, but I don't recognize your authority to define what is or isn't a crime. You claim we violated the accordant principles. I claim we never agreed to them in the first place. So, whose rules are we actually talking about here? The chamber went silent again, but this time it was different. This time the silence had weight, pressure, the kind of quiet that happens right before something breaks. Mulreshi's mandibles opened and closed several times before sound emerged. Are you suggesting that humanity refuses to accept the accordant principles? I'm suggesting, Fiona said, and she smiled, cold and sharp, that you never asked us to accept them. You just assumed we would. And you know what they say about assumptions. Oren was openly grinning now, all pretense of diplomatic decorum abandoned. He looked like he was having the time of his life, which, to be fair, he probably was. This was the kind of mess that tactical officers dreamed about. A proper diplomatic incident with philosophical implications. The accordant principles, Pleshun tried again, pulsing with agitation, have maintained peace and order in this galaxy for 4,000 years. Yeah, you mentioned that, Fiona interrupted. Humans have been having organized warfare for about 10,000 years. We've tried every possible variation on rules of engagement you can imagine. Honor duels, ritualized combat, siege warfare with negotiated terms, naval battles with formal declarations. We've done all of it. And you know what we learned? She paused, letting the question hang. Rules in warfare only work when both sides are more afraid of losing the rules than they are of losing the war, Fiona continued. The moment someone decides that victory matters more than propriety, your rules become suggestions, and suggestions get people killed. Rigimoth leaned forward, and the movement sent small cascades of stone dust falling from the creases in its body. You speak as though you have experienced this betrayal personally. Every human has, Fiona said. We spent thousands of years fighting each other. We had rules, lots of them. Don't target civilians. Don't use certain weapons. Don't fight during certain times. Don't burn certain buildings. And every single one of those rules got broken the moment someone wanted to win badly enough. That's not cynicism, council members. That's history. Then your species is barbaric, Mulreshi said flatly. Fiona laughed. Actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. Maybe, probably. But we're also alive. And we're very, very good at staying that way. Oren nodded enthusiastically. We're excellent at not dying. It's like our whole thing. The council members looked at each other again. This time the communication was clearly more than just glances. Mulreshi's antennae were moving in patterns, Pleshun's colors were shifting rapidly, and even Rymoth had tilted its head slightly, which was probably the Yolmec equivalent of shouting. Finally, Pleshun spoke. "Commander Fiona, Officer Orin, you will explain in detail how humanity conducts warfare. You will justify each violation of the accordant principles, and then this council will decide whether your species is capable of integration into civilized society or whether more stringent measures must be taken." Fiona looked at Orin. Orin looked at Fiona. Some unspoken communication passed between them. The kind that happens between people who've been in combat together. The kind that says, well, we're already in it now. Might as well go all in. "Sure," Fiona said. "Let's talk about how humans fight wars. But I'm warning you right now, you're not going to like it." "We already do not like it," Mulreshi muttered. "Oh," Orin said, grinning wider. "You really, really don't know the half of it yet." Mulreshi pulled up a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Lists, long scrolling lists of alleged human violations, each one tagged with timestamps, coordinates, and little red marks that probably meant extremely unacceptable in whatever rating system the Council used. "Let us begin with the fundamentals," Mulreshi said, mandibles clicking in what Fiona was starting to recognize as anticipatory satisfaction. Like it thought this would be a simple prosecution. The accordant principles, established 4,092 standard rotations ago, following the Great Reconciliation Wars. They consist of 39 primary articles and 216 subsidiary clauses, all designed to ensure that military conflict remains contained, honorable, and conducive to eventual diplomatic resolution. Fiona was already getting a headache. "You have 216 rules for fighting?" "Subsidiary clauses," Pleshun corrected, pulsing smugly. "The primary articles are much simpler. Article 1. All military engagements must occur in designated conflict zones, clearly marked and agreed upon by both parties. Article 2. Notification of combat operations must be provided no less than 6 planetary rotations in advance. Article 3. Combat operations will cease during recognized rest cycles. Article 4. "Wait, hold on," Orin interrupted, and bless him, he looked genuinely confused rather than mocking. "Let me make sure I understand this. You guys schedule your battles? Like, with calendars?" "Of course," Mulreshi said. "How else would one coordinate military operations between multiple species with different biological requirements and communication protocols? The scheduling system alone took 3 generations to perfect." Fiona pinched the bridge of her nose. Okay, let's just, for the sake of argument, accept that this is how you folks operate. Walk me through a typical battle under these accordant principles. How does it work?" Ryamuth spoke up, its gravelly voice somehow managing to sound professorial. "A conflict arises. Territorial dispute, resource disagreement, ideological friction, matters not. The aggrieved party issues a formal challenge through the diplomatic nexus. The challenged party has 30 rotations to respond. If both parties agree that negotiation has failed, they submit proposed conflict zones to the Council for approval." "You submit battle locations for approval," Fiona said flatly. "Naturally. Some zones are too close to civilian populations, trade routes, or culturally significant locations. Once a zone is approved, both parties agree on the scope of engagement. How many vessels? What classification of weapons? Duration of conflict window? Then the engagement occurs." "And during this engagement?" Fiona asked. "Both sides maneuver according to accepted tactical doctrine," Pleshun added. "Flanking is permitted, but must be signaled in advance. Feints are allowed, but excessive deception is considered poor form. Targets must be clearly military in nature. At the conclusion of each day's fighting, both sides withdraw to their respective zones for rest and repair. Medical vessels are granted safe passage. After the agreed-upon duration, casualties are tallied, strategic objectives are assessed, and victory is determined by an independent arbitration committee. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence where Fiona's brain was actively trying to process information that seemed to violate basic logic. "You have referees," she finally said. "You have actual referees for your wars." "Arbiters," Mulreshi corrected stiffly. "And everyone just agrees to this? Nobody ever just shoots the other guy while they're sleeping? Nobody ever lies about their troop numbers? Nobody ever says, 'Actually, we're not withdrawing for rest cycle, we're going to keep attacking'? That would be unconscionable." Pleshun's entire body flashed a color that the translator interpreted as shocked horror. "That would be betrayal of the highest order. Any species that violated the accordant principles in such a manner would face immediate sanctions from the entire council." Oren leaned over to Fiona. "I feel like I'm having a stroke. Is this real? Are we actually having this conversation?" "I'm not convinced we're not in a simulation," Fiona muttered back. Then, louder, "Okay, so let me summarize. You folks have turned warfare into a bureaucratic process, with forms, schedules, and quality control. And this has worked for 4,000 years? "Indeed," Remoth rumbled. "It has prevented total war, preserved countless lives, and maintained stability across the galaxy." "Right up until humans showed up and ignored all of it," Oren said cheerfully. Mulreshi's mandibles clattered like castanets. "You did not merely ignore it. You systematically violated every single principle. You attacked without warning. You used concealment and deception. You targeted our vessels during rest cycles. You employed psychological warfare." "We played to win," Fiona interrupted. "Because from our perspective, you weren't playing a game. You were invading our territory. We issued the proper challenge, which we didn't recognize as legitimate. Look, I'm trying really hard to see this from your perspective, but you're asking me to accept that there's a universal standard for warfare that humanity never agreed to, never even knew about, and somehow we're the bad guys for fighting the way humans have always fought." "The way humans have always fought," Mulreshi repeated, and its tone had shifted into something dangerous, something that sounded like genuine curiosity mixed with revulsion. "Tell us, Commander Fiona, how is that, exactly? What makes human warfare so different from civilized conflict?" Fiona glanced at the holographic display still floating in the chamber's center. All those neat little violation tags blinking accusingly. Then she looked at Oren, who gave her a tiny shrug that said, "We're already here. Might as well burn the whole bridge." "All right," Fiona said, rolling her shoulders like she was preparing for a fight. "You want to understand human warfare? Fine. But you need to understand the context first. Humans evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans, take your pick. We spent about 200,000 years learning that the universe doesn't care about fair, doesn't care about honor, and definitely doesn't care about rules. The only thing that mattered was survival. Many species faced evolutionary hardship," Pleshun interjected. "That does not excuse barbarism." "I'm not making excuses, I'm providing context," Fiona shot back. "Humans started fighting organized wars about 10,000 years ago. And yeah, we had rules, lots of them. Ancient armies would meet in open fields, line up nice and neat, and charge at each other like it was some kind of sport. Generals would duel each other personally. There were whole codes of conduct about who you could and couldn't kill, what weapons were acceptable, when you could and couldn't attack. Then your species understands the concept of military honor, Remoth said. Understood, Fiona corrected. Past tense. Because here's the thing about those old rules. They worked great when everyone followed them. But the instant someone decided winning was more important than honor, those rules became liabilities. Let me give you an example. About 2,300 years ago, there was a human military commander named Hannibal. He was fighting against a much larger force. So you know what he did? Oren was grinning now, clearly knowing where this was going. He used elephants, Fiona continued. War elephants. Marched them through mountains that everyone said were impassable, showed up where his enemy thought he couldn't possibly be, and destroyed an army 3 times his size because nobody expected him to do something that insane. Was it honorable? Debatable? Did it work? Absolutely. That is simple tactical surprise, Mulreshi said dismissively. Article 22 allows for strategic misdirection within acceptable parameters. Okay, different example, Fiona said. Fast forward about 1,500 years, humans had developed really elaborate codes of warfare. Knights, armor, the whole thing. Fighting was supposed to be this noble, one-on-one affair. Then someone invented the longbow, and suddenly peasants could kill armored knights from 100 meters away. The knights said it was dishonorable, unfair, against the rules. The peasants said it was effective. Guess who won? Technological advancement is— I'm not done, Fiona interrupted, and her voice had taken on that lecturing tone that Oren recognized as dangerous. A few hundred years after that, humans developed formal rules for naval warfare. Ships would line up broadside to broadside and blast away at each other like it was some kind of maritime duel. Very orderly, very predictable. Then submarines were invented. Ships that could hide underwater, strike without warning, sink vessels before anyone knew they were there. Was it playing fair? No. Was it against the rules? Absolutely. Did it change warfare forever? You better believe it. Plashun's colors were shifting rapidly through patterns that suggested agitation. You are describing a pattern of consistent rule-breaking. I'm describing adaptation, Fiona said. Every time humans established rules for warfare, someone came along and broke those rules with a better strategy. And you know what happened to the people who kept following the old rules? They lost. They died. They got conquered by people who were willing to do whatever it took to win. This is the philosophy of barbarians, Mulreshi said. Maybe, Fiona agreed, or maybe it's the philosophy of survivors. Let me ask you something. How many species in this galaxy have gone extinct because they followed the accordant principles right up until someone who didn't care about those principles wiped them out? The silence was heavy, uncomfortable. The principles protect all participants, Plashun finally said, but it sounded less certain now. Do they, though? Oren chimed in, leaning forward with that manic energy he got when he was onto something. Because it sounds to us like your principles protect everyone who agrees to play by them. But what happens when someone shows up who doesn't? What's your contingency plan for an enemy who sees your rules as weaknesses to exploit? The Council enforces compliance, Remoth said, but there was something in that grinding voice now, something that might have been unease. Right, the Council, Fiona said. Which brings me to my next point. You want to know why we fought the way we fought? Let me walk you through it from our perspective. We're a young species, barely off our homeworld, trying to establish colonies, and figure out this whole galactic community thing. Then the Urathi show up at Titan's Reach and start bombing civilian settlements. No warning that we recognized as legitimate. No negotiation we understood. Just sudden violence. So we mobilized our fleet, and we did what humans do. We studied the enemy. We found their weaknesses, and we exploited them. You ambushed our supply convoys. Mulreshi's mandibles were practically vibrating. Your supply convoys were traveling on completely predictable routes at scheduled intervals, Oren said. That's not even a military target. That's a gift basket with a bow on it. You attacked during rest cycles. You published your rest cycles in your operational broadcasts, Fiona said, which we intercepted, because apparently nobody in the Urathi fleet thought to encrypt their communications properly. You used camouflage and stealth technology. You painted your ships in bright ceremonial colors that could be spotted from 3 star systems away. Oren was barely containing his laughter now. What were we supposed to do? Paint ours hot pink so you could see us better. You broadcast psychological warfare on our communication frequencies. Fiona actually smiled at that one. Okay, that was Oren's idea. What did we send them? Horror movie soundtracks, Oren said proudly, and some footage from old Earth films about alien invasions. Figured if they were going to invade us, they should see how that usually works out in our entertainment media. You know, as a cultural exchange. Mulreshi looked like it wanted to molt out of its own exoskeleton from sheer frustration. This is not warfare. This is... Effective? Fiona offered. Because we won. Decisively. With minimal casualties on our side. Every tactic we used because it gave us an advantage. Every rule we ignored because following it would have gotten our people killed. You're sitting here acting like we committed some kind of atrocity. But, from where I'm standing, we defended our territory using the tools and knowledge we had available. Without honor, Pleshun said quietly. Honor doesn't bring dead soldiers back to life, Fiona said, and her voice had gone cold now. All the humor drained out. Honor doesn't comfort families who lost loved ones. Honor doesn't rebuild bombed cities. You want to know what human military doctrine prioritizes? Victory, survival, bringing our people home alive. Everything else is secondary. Even morality? Ryamoth asked. That question hung in the air like a blade. Fiona took a breath. We're not monsters. We don't target civilians intentionally. We don't torture prisoners. We don't commit genocide. But we also don't handicap ourselves with arbitrary rules that exist only because everyone agreed to pretend warfare could be civilized. War isn't civilized. War is what happens when civilization fails. And once you're in it, once people are dying, the only moral choice is to end it as quickly and efficiently as possible. By any means necessary, Mulreshi said. By the means that work, Fiona corrected. Look, I get it. You've built this whole system, these accordant principles, and they've kept your conflicts manageable for thousands of years. That's genuinely impressive. But you built that system for yourselves, with your species, your cultures, your histories. Humans weren't part of that negotiation. We didn't agree to those terms. And frankly, from our perspective, your rules look less like peacekeeping and more like a gentleman's agreement between predators to only hunt on certain days of the week. How dare you? Mulreshi started. No, how dare you? Fiona interrupted. And now she was angry, properly angry. You attacked our colony. You killed our people. And now you have the audacity to summon us here and prosecute us for defending ourselves too effectively. You want to call us barbarians? Fine. But at least we're honest about what we are. We don't dress up violence in formal protocols and call it civilization. The chamber had gone so quiet that Fiona could hear the hum of the environmental systems, the subtle clicks of translation matrices processing a dozen languages simultaneously, and the faint grinding sound that was apparently just Rymoth existing. Then Plashun pulsed a deep, dark purple that the translator didn't even try to interpret. "You claim," the Nimari said slowly, each word careful and precise, "that the accordant principles do not apply to humanity because you were not part of their creation. This is your defense?" "It's not a defense," Fiona said. "It's a statement of fact. You can't prosecute someone for breaking rules they never agreed to follow." "The principles are universal law," Mulreshi insisted. But its mandibles were clicking erratically now, a sign Fiona had learned meant uncertainty. "Universal according to who?" Orin asked, and he wasn't smiling anymore. He'd shifted into his tactical analysis mode, the one where he got scary competent. "Let me guess. The 5 founding species of the Galactic Council got together 4,000 years ago, established these rules among yourselves, and then every species that came after just had to accept them as given. Is that about right?" The council representatives, exchanged looks again. This time the silence was different. Guilty, almost. "The accordant principles," Rymoth finally said, "were established following the Great Reconciliation Wars, a period of conflict that nearly destroyed all spacefaring civilization in this region of the galaxy. The founding species recognized that unrestricted warfare would lead to mutual extinction. The principles were born from necessity. For you," Fiona said, "they were necessary for you, because you were equally matched, equally destructive, and equally terrified of total war. So you created a system that limited the damage any one conflict could cause. That's not morality. That's pragmatism. That's a cartel agreement among equals to not destroy the market. You reduce our greatest diplomatic achievement to economics," Plashun said, and its bioluminescence flickered with what might have been hurt. "I'm being honest about what it is," Fiona replied. "And honestly, it's smart. If I'd been in your position 4,000 years ago, I probably would have done the same thing. But here's the problem. You didn't just create rules for yourselves. You created rules for everyone who came after. Every new species that achieved spaceflight got inducted into your system, accepted your principles, followed your protocols, and I'm betting none of them had much choice in the matter, did they?" Mulreshi's antennae went flat. "Membership in the Galactic Council requires acceptance of its foundational documents." "Which includes the accordant principles," Orin said. "So basically, join the club or stay isolated. That's not universal law. That's coercion with extra steps." "It is order," Rymoth said, and there was definitely defensiveness in that grinding voice now. "It is stability. It is the prevention of chaos." "It's control," Fiona said. "And I'm not even saying that's wrong, necessarily. But you need to call it what it is. You established a system that worked for you, enforced it on everyone else, and called it civilization. And now humanity shows up, doesn't follow your rules because we don't recognize them as legitimate, and you're shocked that we don't play by the galactic playbook. If every species behaved as humans do," Plashun said, pulsing with agitation, "warfare would escalate beyond all control. The principles exist precisely to prevent total war." "Do they, though?" Orin asked, and he pulled up his own datapad, projecting a holographic display next to the Council's list of violations. "Because we did some research while we were on our way here. Want to know how many conflicts have occurred under the accordant principles in the last 1,000 years? This is irrelevant, Mulreshi started. 362, Oren continued, ignoring the interruption. 362 formal military engagements, all conducted according to your rules. And want to know what's interesting? The average duration of these conflicts. 18 months. Some went on for years. Multiple ships destroyed. Thousands of casualties. Entire planetary economies disrupted. All because you folks turned warfare into a sustainable, manageable process. Fiona picked up the thread. You made war safe enough that it became acceptable. You created rules that limited the damage of any individual conflict, which sounds great until you realize it also removed the incentive to avoid conflict in the first place. Why negotiate when you can just schedule a battle, fight it out under controlled conditions, and let the arbiters decide who wins? That is a gross mischaracterization, Plashun protested. Is it? Fiona challenged. How many of those 362 conflicts could have been resolved through negotiation if both sides had been genuinely afraid of the alternative? How many times did species go to war because they knew the rules would keep it from getting too messy? The council was silent. Not the angry silence from before, but something more uncomfortable. The silence of people confronting an idea they'd never wanted to think about. What are you suggesting? Remoth asked finally. I'm suggesting, Fiona said, that your accordant principles might have prevented total war, but they enabled chronic war. You sanitized violence enough that it became just another tool of diplomacy. And now humanity shows up, fights a war the old-fashioned way, makes it brutal and terrifying and decisive, and suddenly everyone's uncomfortable. Maybe that discomfort is the point. You think fear is a better deterrent than honor? Mulreshi said, and it wasn't quite a question. I think fear is a more honest deterrent, Fiona replied. Honor requires trust. Honor requires everyone to believe in the same values, the same codes. Fear just requires everyone to understand consequences. We made the Orathi fleet understand that attacking human territory would be costly, bloody, and ultimately futile. That's a lesson that doesn't require a shared cultural framework. You advocate for terror as policy, Plashun said, colors shifting into what the translator marked as disgust. We advocate for making war unappealing, Oren corrected. There's a difference. If your accordant principles actually prevented war, we'd be all for them. But they don't. They just make war polite. Remoth leaned forward, and chunks of stone-like skin flaked off with the movement. The Yolmec representative had been quiet for a while now, just listening, and when it finally spoke, its voice carried a weight that made everyone else stop. Commander Fiona, Officer Oren, you speak as though the accordant principles are a deception, as though we, the Council, created them cynically to maintain power. But you do not understand. You cannot understand, because you were not there. The chamber shifted. Something in Remoth's tone demanded attention. The Great Reconciliation Wars lasted 6 generations, Remoth continued. Not 6 years, 6 generations. Species fought with every weapon they could create, every tactic they could conceive, and they did not stop. They could not stop. Because once you begin total war, once you abandon all restraint, there is no path back. Only escalation. Only mutual annihilation. The Yolmec homeworld was bombed so thoroughly that it still cannot support agriculture. The Urathi lost 3 colony worlds to bioweapons that sterilized entire planetary ecosystems. The Nemari watched their ocean worlds boiled away by thermal weapons. We did not create the accordant principles to maintain power. We created them because we were terrified of extinction. Fiona felt something shift in her chest. This was the first time any of the council representatives had sounded genuinely human, vulnerable, scared. The principles saved us, Ryemoth said quietly. They gave us a way to step back from the edge. They created a framework where conflicts could be resolved without ending civilizations. And yes, perhaps they made war too acceptable. Perhaps we traded one problem for another. But at least we survived. And now you're afraid we'll break that, Fiona said, understanding dawning. You're afraid that if humanity fights without your rules, other species will start questioning why they follow them. The system only works if everyone believes in it. Yes, Ryemoth said simply. Orin looked at Fiona. Fiona looked at Orin. They were both thinking the same thing. They'd walked into what they thought was a simple disciplinary hearing, and instead they'd stumbled into an existential crisis for the entire galactic order. Okay, Fiona said slowly. I can see your perspective now. You're not just worried about humans being barbaric. You're worried about humans being contagious. You're worried that our way of fighting will spread. And then you're right back where you started 4,000 years ago. Precisely, Mulreshi said, and for once its mandibles weren't clicking with aggression, just weariness. Then we have a problem, Fiona said. Because humanity isn't going to adopt the accordant principles, we can't. It's not in our nature, and more importantly, it's not in our strategic interest. We're newcomers to the galaxy. We're outnumbered, and we're surrounded by species with thousands of years more experience. The only advantage we have is that we fight differently. You're asking us to give up the one thing that keeps us competitive. And if we refuse to accept your barbarism? Pleshun asked. Then we stay barbaric, Orin said cheerfully, though the humor didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. And you figure out what you're going to do about it. The Council could embargo Earth, Mulreshi said, declare humanity an outlaw species, enforce compliance through economic and military pressure. You could try, Fiona agreed. We'd survive it. Humans are really good at surviving things. But here's what I don't get. Why is your first instinct punishment? Why not adaptation? That caught them off guard. Adaptation? Pleshun pulsed. Yeah, adaptation, Fiona said, warming to the idea now. You've had the same system for 4,000 years. Maybe humanity showing up isn't a crisis. Maybe it's an opportunity to evolve. Mulreshi's antennae twitched. You suggest we abandon the accordant principles? I suggest you stop treating them like religious doctrine, Orin said. They worked for you. Great. But maybe there's room for different approaches. Maybe humanity's way of fighting makes other species think twice before starting conflicts. Maybe fear of brutal, decisive war actually prevents more wars than your polite scheduling system ever did. Or maybe, Ryemoth said slowly, and there was something almost like admiration in that grinding voice, humanity teaches the galaxy that war should be horrifying, that it should be something to avoid at all costs, not something to schedule like a sporting event. Fiona nodded. We're not trying to destroy your system. We're just not part of it. You asked us whose rules we follow. The answer is our own. Rules we developed through 10,000 years of hard experience. Rules that say, if you're going to fight, you fight to win, you fight to end it quickly, and you make sure the cost is high enough that nobody wants to do it again. And if the Council cannot accept this, Pleshun asked, then we have a bigger conversation ahead of us, Fiona said. But here's the thing. We didn't come to your galaxy looking for a fight. We just refused to lose one because we followed rules we never agreed to. Remoth stood, stone grinding against stone. This tribunal is adjourned. The council will deliberate. As Fiona and Orin walked out, Molareshi's voice followed them. This isn't finished, humans. Fiona looked back, smiled. No, but next time someone attacks us, maybe they'll remember what happened to the last guys who did. That's not barbarism. That's just good communication. The door closed behind them,